Big Bear Nation, and welcome back to the homestead. So we're getting really close to culling a bunch of our roosters, our older hens, and finish up the processing for our meat birds that are left on the farm. So this was a good opportunity for me to kind of look at some of these young juveniles and see which ones are roosters, and maybe go ahead and put them off to the side so we can fatten them up before it starts to get really cold here. But it begs the question, how do you tell? If they're not crowing, how do you know? Because at this age, they're really not even developing spurs. So what are some things you can look at to kind of get a better guess of whether you have a hen or a cockerel? Okay, so let's look at what I suspect is a cockerel first, and that's a boy juvenile chicken. The very first thing you're going to want to look at is their tail feathers. Now, a lot of these feathers, it's hard to see right now because he's not standing up straight. But when he's standing, you'll see some of these feathers that are curved right here, they actually hang over the side of his tail. And that's called a sickle. Now, when you get to where you can see like a full-grown rooster, you'll see this. It's definitive. You can't miss it. It's this beautiful feather that just kind of sticks out the backside and curves down. So that's the first thing that we would look for. The second thing is we're going to look for the saddle area. Now, the saddle feathers are in a male. The saddle feathers are very thin and they're pointy down at the bottom. And you can see that with these guys. They're very thin and they're very, very pointy. And they kind of go all throughout the backside here. You'll see a ton of these pointy, thin feathers. And then the next thing that we would look at is the hackles. And these are the feathers that are on the back of the head going down the neck. Now on a cockerel, these two are going to be thin and they're going to be pointy and long. And if you look at these, that's exactly what they are. They're very thin and they're very pointy and they're very long. They hang down from the back of his head and they go all the way down his body, all the way down to here. Okay? Now the last thing that I look at is the comb. And the face, just the face in general. This guy, if you look, his comb's pretty wide, like it's pretty long. And then his whole face is bright red, like he's got a fully colored face. On the pullets, you'll see in a minute that their face is a little less drained of color, but you can tell with his, and then his wattle right here, it's kind of big. And it's very bright red. So, as far as I can tell, this is a cockerel. Now, we could check for spurs, but at this size, you're not really going to see them. Both male and female birds at this age will have that little nub on their feet. He does have them, but I will tell you, they are a little pointy. And they do have a little bit of a little roughness to them. With the females, it kind of just looks like a pimple. But with his are actually they're starting to get a little bit of a tip to them. So I'm pretty sure that this guy is in fact a guy. You're a cockerel, aren't you? Okay, so now we're going to look at what I think is a pullet. Very first thing we're going to look at is that tail feather, right? Now, with a hen, their tail feathers tend to be a little bit more when they're sitting straight up, and she's not going to do it for me right now, but it'll actually point at a V and go up. It'll kind of feather up. Yeah, okay, you see how there's like a V right here, and it's kind of rounded up right there? So that's the very first thing with the tail feather, is with a female, you'll see it kind of, it'll be like a V going down, and it'll all kind of come together on the ends. Now, the second thing that you'll look at is that saddle, right? We looked at the saddle on the cockerel. Now, on the female, those feathers that we saw on the cockerel that were pointed, if you see on these, they're rounded. And they're not as pointy and as thin. Now, the hackle feathers, when you just look at them, they look like they're long and pointy, but if you actually pick them up and look at them, they're not nearly as pointy. They're kind of round, and they're nice and wide, and they're rounded. They're not pointed like the ones on the cockerel. So you can see quite a bit of difference. Now we move on to the comb. Now hers is a little bit bigger, but not the way that the rooster was. You know, the rooster's was growing so much that it was kind of leaning over, but hers is still small and kind of recessed back in a little bit, where with the rooster, you'll see as theirs grow, it'll kind of, you know, reach forward and it'll be nice and bright red. She's a little bit more dull color. So again, another indicator that this is more than likely a pullet. Now let's look at these feet. She also has those bumps, and that's what I was going to say, is that, you know, where the boys will develop spurs, the girls do end up having these little notches here. So that's not nearly as definitive of anything, especially at this age. They're still really young, and it's kind of hard to tell just from that. They don't really start growing those spurs, you know, until they get a little bit bigger. So, but I still, just looking at these feathers, the way that they're shaped, I am almost 100% sure that this is a pullet. Now at this age, this is not 100% accurate. It's not definitive, but at least gives you an idea to what to look for when you're looking at your juvenile birds, and kind of get an idea of whether you have male or female. I think in our case it was pretty clear, but like as I'm looking in here, there are some that are kind of iffy. But I will tell you, once you start being able to notice those saddle feathers and the hackles, and you see just the way that the pointy feathers look versus the rounded feathers, you should be able to look at just about any bird and have a pretty good idea of whether it's a male or a female. I hope this video was helpful for you today. If you enjoyed this video, go check this video over here where I show you how to tell whether or not your hen is still laying eggs. Thank you for stopping by the Big Bear Homestead. God bless, and have a nice day.